Yep, back over to me. So thank you very much, Chris. That was excellent. Thank you. Right, where are we going next? So I'm just conscious of time. So there is a video that I'll pop that link in the chat. I'm not going to play it now. But that's also a good resource just to give you a kind of a grounded view of population health management with two people who have got type 2 diabetes and how the PHM approach helped them. So I'm going to skip on now, and I'm going to introduce Hannah McGurk, Health Improvement Specialist, working in public health at Leeds City Council. So come in, Hannah, are you there?
I am. Hello.
It's working. Excellent.
Yay.
So again, if you just want, I'll control the slides here, and if you just say next slide, please, then I'll move us along. So over to you, Hannah. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Graham. And thank you, Chris, for the introduction. So I'm just going to build on a bit of what Chris has already talked about. And I'm available throughout your PHM journey for any kind of frailty specific training or questions or anything that you might have. And if you do have any questions throughout my presentation, just put your questions in the chat and I'll try and answer them. Next slide, please, Graham. My slides are taking a while to come up on my screen, so apologies if I kind of pause in between. So just a quick refresh of the warm-up slides that you should have all had that Graham did with you. So, and also Chris has had an introduction of what population health management is. You should have all met the local care partnership team. Hopefully you've seen something about the electronic frailty index, but I'll talk about that in a bit as well. The Leeds proactive model, as Chris has just gone through as well. And then I'll talk through the outcomes for people living with frailty. And you should have all seen your data packs. So hopefully that makes sense as well in kind of the work that you're going to be doing later on throughout this program. Next slide, please, Graham. So I'm going to cover two main things. The first is about aging well in Leeds and kind of what we're doing as a city. And then the second is about living with frailty in Leeds. So Leeds is a member of the World Health Organization Age-Friendly Cities Partnership. So there's a global partnership that also gives us a framework to strategically support healthy aging. And then in Leeds as well, we've got the Leeds Age-Friendly Approach, which is part of the Health and Wellbeing Strategy. So the Health and Wellbeing Strategy kind of looks at Leeds as a city in terms of infrastructure, including housing, transport, open spaces, and kind of age-friendly Leeds looks at how do we make all of that age-friendly. And that's broader than the council. That's the council and the NHS and kind of lots of partners across the city. And then living with frailty in Leeds, I'll talk through some of the engagement that we've done with people, both before COVID and during COVID, and kind of what they've told us matters to them. And then I'll talk through some of the tools and services that are already out there and might support you with the work that you're doing. Next slide, please, Graham. So this is a quote from Professor Martin Vernon, who's the former National Clinical Director for Older People from NHS England. And I thought it was just a good way to kind of set the scene of what I'm talking about. So active and healthy aging is important for everyone. Focusing on frailty now creates a golden opportunity to enable more of us to age well while planning ahead, discussing what matters most and ensuring we get the right care and support both now and into the future. And as Chris has mentioned already, older people have been disproportionately affected by COVID, and frailty is a significant factor of that. And we also know that around 95% of people who've died have been over 60. So particularly at the moment, that's kind of something that's quite important in this work. And the COVID stuff has kind of strengthened the vision that we have for frailty. And there is a lot of work going on around that, but PHM is kind of more focused on the longer term change. So it's a bit broader than obviously the COVID work that's going on. Next slide, please, Graham. So when it comes up on my screen. There we go. So this is the Leeds Health and Wellbeing Strategy. Hopefully you've seen it. It's driving lots of this work. So in our city, wellbeing starts with people and everything's connected. So I've highlighted some of the elements. There's 12 different priority areas, but so we've got number 2 is an age-friendly city where people age well. We've also got down at the bottom, number 8 is a stronger focus on prevention. That's a lot of what this work is trying to do. And then number 9 as well, about supporting self-care with more people managing their own conditions. So that's kind of just to, again, put in context some of the things that are driving this work. Next slide, please. So I'll talk a little bit about age-friendly Leeds. So our ambition for age-friendly Leeds is to be the best city to grow old in and a place where people age well. This is where older people are valued, feel respected and appreciated, and are seen as the assets that they are. Age-friendly Leeds is one of the 8 interconnected priority areas of work set out in the health and wellbeing strategy, and it's also in the Best Council plan. So it is quite a strategic vision for the city, and we've also got an action strategy and an action plan based on 6 priority areas, which I'll talk about in a second. And just to really highlight that the approach that we take with this is that people are at the heart of what we're doing. It really does need to come from people. Next slide, please. And so this slide just shows you on the left, we've got the age-friendly domains. So we've got public and civic spaces, housing, active, included and respected, employment and learning, healthy and independent aging, and transport. And then on the right-hand side, there's the strategy and action plan. So the Age Friendly Leeds Partnership has partners from all different organisations across the city. You might have some of those partners in your LCP. They might be in the room now. And we tend to focus on healthy and independent aging for the frailty work, but it's important that you can't have one without the other 5 domains. For instance, housing has a big impact on health and kind of lived experience of frailty. If your house isn't accessible to you, if it's not heated properly, the impact of your mental health, things like that. And transport is another one that we talk about often. Kind of, it's brilliant to have lunch clubs and activities in your area, but if people can't get there, they might as well not exist. So kind of the importance of looking at it as a whole, and particularly for LCPs, I think that's a key to working together and understanding how we all fit together to achieve these goals. And then I've also just put there, this is also a helpful tool for asset mapping later, which I think is something you'll be doing in later workshops. Next slide, please. So linking this in with the frailty work, we've got different cogs. So as an age-friendly city, these are the things we're kind of focusing on. And the key here is that we aren't just using data to find something to work on. We have outcomes that we're working to achieve. So the first one, we've got outcomes that were developed by people living in Leeds. There was a big survey. We asked people themselves, professionals. So it's a very Leeds-based document. Then to support that, we've also got the proactive model, which gives us the framework to deliver the outcomes, which is what Chris talked through, that big document with all the moving parts. So again, that's all been thought out, and there is a framework that we have flexibility to work within. And then age-friendly cities kind of helps tie it in together, helps us to kind of have those domains to also look at some other ways that we could bring that all together. Next slide, please. So these are the outcomes for people living with frailty. You've hopefully seen them. They are taken from the vision from Leeds that was published last year. And I think when Graham did the warm-up slides, this was also linked to the outcome measures, the promise and the P3CEQ. So that's kind of helping us to make sure that we are, oh, sorry, messages are popping up. So those measures help us to judge how far we are with achieving these outcomes. So again, just kind of, we have outcomes that we're working towards. So if we keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So again, just the proactive frailty model, just to pull it all together, that's kind of, you can have a look at it a bit more and you'll explore it a bit more throughout the program, I'm sure, and just having a look at the different elements that you might be interested in working in, but I won't spend too much longer on that. Next slide, please. And then again, that's the breakdown that Chris talked about, the fact that there's different elements. and that we are flexible within the framework. People in the previous waves has focused on different bits. So some people have looked at care coordinators, others have looked at different ways of having case managers. There's been a lot of work about personalised care planning. And really the essence of this is kind of doing what people have told us matters. So person-centred care, working with people, looking at the whole of a person. So hopefully this kind of ties together and makes you feel that there's a framework within. You can now start thinking of what you might want to do in your own LCPs. Next slide, please. So this slide was presented in 2018, so the data is a little bit out, but I think it still kind of shows a good picture of what frailty looks like in Leeds. And it's just highlighting that frailty is a range of conditions that impact on a person's ability to live independently. It's not a single disease group or a group of diseases, and it's not defined by age. And then particularly within COVID, this is an evolving picture. And I think, like Chris mentioned as well, with COVID, the mortality rate is the end kind of bit of that. There will also be a lot of people whose lives have changed. There's a lot of work going on around deconditioning and the impact for people living with frailty. And that kind of gives an opportunity. We might be able to really make a big difference to quality of life of those people if we can kind of do some proactive work as well. Next slide, please. So this slide, you may have seen it already. I think Graham showed it in the warm-up slides. So this is the medical model for identifying frailty, the Electronic Frailty Index, or EFI. And the cohort that we're looking at is drawn from the EFI, and this is something that's automatically generated on primary care systems. It's a way to identify people living with certain conditions that contribute to frailty. So there's a couple of examples up there. It provides an individual score for people, but it's only as good as the information that's been put into the system. So kind of the information that GPs have on their systems, that's where it's all drawing from. Therefore, it's useful to use a second tool to validate this. So it'll give you a score, but it's really important to then go and have a conversation with somebody. So we use the Rockwood scale because that also takes into account resilience. So the EFI is very much counting up kind of where it's got there like the disease states or disabilities or symptoms. But if we move to the next slide. Then this is the Rockwood scale. So we would use them together. So the Rockwood scale, like I said, is good at looking at resilience. It has different levels of frailty. So it goes from number 1, which is very fit, to number 9, which is terminally ill. So we'll all be on the scale somewhere. And I've highlighted in red the frailty ones. So this isn't solely based on disease or health condition. It also takes into account resilience. So for example, somebody with a life-limiting illness might have a higher EFI score, but when you take into account their resilience and lifestyle, like they might have fantastic housing, family nearby, they're on the right medication, they've kind of got things sorted, then they're probably coping a bit better than somebody who didn't have those resilience factors. So that might change their frailty category. This also highlights the importance of conversations, and like Chris said in his example, what's normal for you, because it could be that somebody does have a high EFI, but actually they're coping fine, and we need to know what they want from it. And there's also e-learning for this. So the writing's gone a bit funny in that bubble, but there is e-learning from the people who created this scale. It's really useful, I think. It takes about 10-15 minutes to kind of test your understanding of how you would put this scale into practice for people who don't do it already. And yeah, I've also just got on that second bubble there as well. So it's useful for sense checking EFI scores, but also preventing people from moving to the next category. So I think it shows you quite nicely what the next category might be and how you maybe try and prevent that from happening. Next slide, please, Graham. So this, again, just about resilience and frailty. So the picture on the left, that's used quite a lot. You might have seen it as well. There's one that's got a green line. So the red line kind of just shows somebody living with frailty. So the top bit, they're independent, so they're going along. Then there's a minor illness or something. Then they kind of go below the dependency line, and then there's an unpredictable recovery. That's kind of the impact of what frailty does. It makes it unpredictable because you might not have the resilience to bounce back the way that somebody not living with frailty would do. And I've also just said there about the importance of looking at frailty holistically. So we need to support people to build their resilience as well, which again is like one of the benefits of working in an LCP. The social support, the physical activity, the mental health, the kind of looking at someone as a whole person and how we all contribute to developing their resilience. So again, what I've said there about identifying people earlier, working proactively, and a personalised approach about what matters to me. Next slide, please. And we've put this in as well because health inequalities are really important to take into account as well. Frailty isn't just an EFI score. It's not just an older person, and age is not the only thing. So it's important to be aware of the added dimensions that health inequalities also bring in terms of people's resilience. So we know that people living with frailty in deprived communities are likely to have less positive outcomes. Like Chris has already said, the impact of COVID and such on BAME communities, and then people with underlying physical and mental health conditions as well, that adds another dimension to it. We've also got in Leeds the Age Proud campaign around ageism. So if you want to have a look at that, the link is on there, and I'm sure we'll share the slides as well if anyone would like to have a look at any of those. Next slide, please. So this is just a triangle that we use quite a lot. I know we use it in public health quite a lot, probably elsewhere in the city as well, just showing how vulnerability combines the protected characteristics with the factors relating to where you live and how you're treated in society. So that's just another way to kind of look at health inequalities and vulnerability. And I've just listed some of the vulnerable and marginalised populations there. And that's kind of just a slide to get you thinking about what are the needs of people living with these inequalities and how would we address them through the LCP working, kind of making sure that we take into account people in our communities who need this the most, rather than just going off kind of EFI scores. There's a lot more as well to it. Next slide, please. So there are a couple of videos that I think are pretty good. We're going to try and show you the first one, the Frailty Fulcrum. Apologies if you've seen it. We just think it's a good way to kind of bring together the understanding of frailty. And then in your own time, we'll share as well the Frailty Focus video. That's a bit of an easier, more kind of public-facing video explaining frailty. And then there's the link for the e-learning. Graham, are you happy to try and show the Frailty Fulcrum video?
Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome.
I can do that. Let me get back where my windows are. Okay. So if I find Frailty Fulcrum. Just check. Did people hear the sound there? Just give us a thumbs up. Yeah, cool.
Here's a young person. When we're young, we're resilient. We're energetic and carefree. And when we need to push ourselves, we don't think twice about it. As time goes on, we begin to change. Life isn't quite as straightforward as it used to be. And the things we used to be able to do, we can't always do in the same ways. By the time we reach older age, we have to start being more careful. It's not that our quality of life is diminished. We just have to be aware that some things become more difficult, and the likelihood of a small thing causing a big problem is greater. There are many different aspects of our lives that contribute to our well-being. We will call these domains. Things like our social environment. This can be our families, our friends, our communities, any of the people or places that are important to us. There's also our physical environment, particularly our homes, but also the many places we visit as we live our lives. We also have our psychological status, made up both of specific conditions such as anxiety or depression, or more general feelings like a loss of confidence or a lack of motivation. Many of us are also living with one or more long-term conditions. Things like diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, or dementia. Inevitably, from time to time, we will also encounter acute health problems. For example, things like infections or injuries. Finally, we have the systems of care that exist to support us in our times of need. They have a direct impact upon our well-being, not just through the care they provide, but also through the way they deliver that care. Our quality of life depends on the balance and interactions between these various domains. Domains that have a bigger impact upon our quality of life are further from the centre. The position of these domains comes from understanding how each one is affecting us as an individual. If they are putting our quality of life at risk, they create vulnerability and are placed to one side. However, if they are reducing this risk, they are adding resilience and are placed to the other. Our quality of life depends upon the overall balance between this vulnerability and resilience. Over time, the positions of these domains may change. Sometimes this will be because of something we've done ourselves, and sometimes it will be due to outside influences. When the influence of one domain changes, quality of life can be maintained as long as the overall balance between vulnerability and resilience is preserved. This can be done either by addressing the issue in that domain, or by offsetting it with actions in another. Therefore, regardless of the specific impact of any one domain, we can always help to achieve the best possible quality of life by considering the others. The difficulty in balancing all domains is the condition called frailty. Now we can understand why keeping a good balance between all the different things going on in our lives becomes more difficult as we get older. Impacts that might cause a loss of balance in someone who is frail do not have the same effect on someone who is not. This model shows the relationship and difference between frailty and ageing. It also shows the dynamic and holistic nature of frailty and its direct relationship to quality of life. Perhaps most importantly of all, this model makes us realise that many different opportunities exist to help achieve the best possible quality of life for people with frailty.
Awesome. Thank you, Graham. I think I've only got a couple more slides left. I'll finish my slides and then pause and then have a break for questions, if that's okay. So if you go to the next slide. This is just a little summary. There's only 2 slides, but there's a whole lot more if you're interested in some of the engagement work that we've done with older people in Leeds. And these are some of the questions that we asked. So we asked what frailty means to you. We asked what matters to you when keeping healthy as we age. We talked a bit about the proactive model for frailty. So we kind of summarized, the big document with all the moving parts and kind of asked people's opinions on it. We asked about what they thought of the frailty focus video. So that's the other video that we didn't show you today, but go have a look at it because it's really brilliant. We asked if people plan for the future, but these weren't set questions. This was kind of, we went with the energy in the room and what mattered to them in the topic area. So if you go to the next slide, this is just an overall summary of kind of what people said. So one of the main things that we were quite aware of was we did this engagement with groups that already existed. And so social isolation, the people who are harder to reach, who don't socially connect with other kind of people in the building or go to these groups, we didn't capture those voices, which we are really quite aware of. And similarly with COVID, we're aware that there'll be maybe some people who are now known to services based on kind of the shielded lists and how we've been proactively working. But that might not necessarily be on clinical records. It might be that the third sector have that knowledge, and kind of, again, the importance of working together and working as an LCP and sharing that and making sure we get to the people who need this most. The second bit was quite interesting, and we've talked a lot about it kind of around the city. So nobody objected to the term frailty that we used when we did these engagement sessions, but context matters because we very much framed this within a healthy aging approach rather than saying, you're frail, how do you feel about it? It was very much a as you get older and kind of healthy aging, and talking about that in a much more positive way. And then people didn't have any objections to the word frailty, which is quite interesting. In terms of gender, we went across the city, different places, and at each session there were predominantly women there. I think there's about 3 men that came to the various sessions, and none of them spoke, which is, again, interesting. Kind of how do we support men, older men particularly, across the city. Transport was another big thing. Lots of people were not happy about the fact that bus passes only start after 9:30, which I know is a small thing, but it does have implications for things like attending appointments and other activities, and kind of just highlights again the importance of those other domains that we've got and how they all work together. And then in terms of local activities, there wasn't really a one place that people went to find information, which again is quite interesting. And the importance again of LCPs and finding out your own communities and making sure you understand it and where people might go for information about the things you're doing. The next slide, please. This is a bit of engagement that sorry, the words have kind of gone out of kilter. But we've done a little bit of engagement with older people during COVID as well. So we spoke to people in May and June. And we've kind of just put it into some of these categories. So in terms of social environment, obviously people are feeling quite isolated, a lot of people. The importance of human contact, so Zoom and Zoom calls and the digitization of things is fantastic, but also people do need to still see people and how we do that going forwards. And then lots of people have said they felt excluded from their communities, which is an interesting one. Physical environment, there's lots of people don't have safe green spaces, lots of people don't have gardens or parks that they feel they can go to during COVID and kind of lockdown when that was happening. And overcrowded housing has been quite difficult for a lot of people, or inaccessible housing. So those are some of the issues that we might be dealing with a lot more now as we kind of start to support people post-COVID. Psychological status, as I'm sure you know, lots of confusion about messages, particularly for older people. There's been a big impact on mental health and more people reporting suicidal feelings. So again, that is possibly something that you're going to be working with a lot more moving forward. In terms of long-term conditions, people having difficulty managing conditions that they previously did manage. So for example, people who maybe manage diabetes by doing regular exercise have now struggled with that because of not being able to go out and things like that. So kind of even things that they have been dealing with all right, COVID has quite a lot of impacts in different ways for many older people. And then in terms of acute health problems, there's lots of information about people being worried about going into hospital, not wanting to access primary care or just healthcare because other people need it more. And so it's just a snapshot of some of the things that older people might be facing going forward as a result of COVID. There is a lot of work going on around this, particularly for older people in the city. And if anyone's interested, we can get someone to either send you the slides or do a meeting about that, because there's quite a lot that we're doing to try and address these additional issues. If you would go to the next slide, please, Graham. And then this slide is just a little bit more of the same. It's just initial insight about people accessing health and social care and some of the things that they said. That's just for your information, just kind of some people are finding it difficult to navigate the system. Some people aren't comfortable with routine appointments and worried about catching COVID. But if we go to the next slide, please. So on a more positive note, these are some of the, I'll just talk through some of the services that we have already in the city. So there's a number of services commissioned by the council, but also the CCG to support this agenda. And I'll just give you a quick update of what they all are. Hopefully some of you know about them. I'm sure some of you are from those services. But if we could go to the next slide. Oh, my screen has gone blank. There we go. So the first one is the SWIFT service. So that stands for Supported Wellbeing and Independence for Frailty. So it's a service to support people aged 50 plus who might be living with frailty, poor mental health, social isolation, other complex issues. We've put the contact details there for Age UK because they run the citywide service, but there are 10 other local partners around the city. But the contact details are there if you want to find out more or refer anyone to them. We've also got neighbourhood networks. I'm not going to read through all of these, but if you don't know who your local neighbourhood network is, you can have a look on the Leeds Older People's Forum, their website down at the bottom. Apologies again, the text has kind of come out of the boxes. And then obviously as well, we've got the social prescribing service in Leeds. I know we've got somebody from Linking Leeds on the call. So again, there's the contact details there. If you don't know about social prescribing, have a read of that, but also get in touch with, if you don't know who your local person is, that's the general email for them. Next slide, please, Graham. So then we also commission lunch clubs, and those are grants that are administered by the Leeds Community Foundation. There are around 90 clubs in the city, which is quite a lot, but during COVID, quite a lot of them have paused because some of them are maybe just a few older people running it themselves. So if you want to find out about what local clubs there are, we would recommend you go to Leeds Directory to have a look. And if it's not on there, but you think that there might be one in your area, if you get in touch with me, then we can have a look and kind of look at the list that we have of lunch clubs. We've also got Home Plus, which is delivered by Age UK, Care and Repair, Groundwork and the Green Doctor. So that's very much about housing. And yeah, it kind of says there. That's a really good service for quite a range of different things, particularly as we're coming up to winter. They do a lot of grants and support for people with adaptations, heating, things like that. So that's a good service to be aware of as well if you're not already aware. And then the next slide. So the last two, this list isn't exhaustive, but just a couple of things we picked out. There's also the Active Leeds health programs. They've got a lot of things that they do to support people with physical activity. And then during COVID as well, they've also put loads of their resources online. For example, there's Tai Chi sessions that people can do. There's the strength and balance. There's quite a lot of physical activity things. So there's the website and the email address as well there for them. And then 100% Digital Leeds, you may or may not have worked with them during COVID. I know they've done a lot of work in terms of helping people to get digital. I know Crossgates has done a lot of work with them. But yeah, so if you're not aware or you want to get in touch with them, the website is there if you want to have a look. And then the almost last slide I have, if you go to the next one, please, Graham. In terms of training for frailty, we are developing Want to Know More sessions with the Public Health Resource Centre. So if you're interested in those, kind of finding out a bit more about frailty, let me know and we can send you details for that when that's done. But also there's an offer of, if you want to do frailty training with your LCP or your teams, more than happy to come and do something bespoke with you if there's anything in particular you want to focus on. And then there's also the Better Conversations team. You may or may not have come across them. Their flyer is there on the right. So during COVID, they've moved a lot of things online. So they now have free e-learning and virtual interactive sessions. Get in touch with them if you're interested. They're really brilliant at kind of how you have those more meaningful conversations about what matters to people. And similarly, they're very open to having a conversation if you think that there would be something that your LCP or your team wants bespoke training on. If you go to the next slide, please, Graham. So this was just a reflection to kind of bring it all together, thinking about the age-friendly leads domains and what matters to people. These might be some of the things that you want to consider kind of in your LCP. Do you know what partners are involved in these different bits? What's working well and what are the challenges? But I think that you'll kind of be discussing that a bit more in your groups after the break. And then the last slide from me is just, if you move to the next slide, Graham, the last slide is just some of the resources that you might find useful, which again, I'm sure we can share with you after this. And that is it from me. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannah. That was fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so we have a bit of a break coming up. Let me get to the right slide. So there comes a bit of a technical thing now. So we're going to do a group exercise. So you're all aligned to an LCP. If you aren't aligned to an LCP and you're just here just looking in, or you're not aligned to an LCP in wave 3, then please feel free just to jump into whichever breakout room that you want and get involved. So just get involved. So, having listened to everything that we've heard this morning, we want to jump out into a group exercise and essentially reflecting on what you've heard and the potential cohort that you've chosen based on the data packs that you've seen. What does it mean to age well in your local care partnership? What do you know works well for your potential cohort, and are you aware of any barriers? So, those are the questions that we'd like you to discuss in your breakout groups within your local care partnership. And this is going to still be within Teams. So don't get frustrated. It's fine. It'll work. You've managed to get here, so it will work fine. So within Teams, if you just want to have a look now, on the left-hand side of your screen, you will see this little icon called Teams here. And if you click on it, then you want to be finding this team here called Leeds Population Health Management Wave 3. And within there, so we're currently in this, what we're calling our main hall, and there's a series of breakout rooms by LCP. So what I'd like you to do in a minute is not hang up this call, just keep it running. I'd like you to then navigate. So if you are a Wetherby person, I'd like you to click on Breakout Room 3 Wetherby, and within there, one of the LCP development team will have just bobbed out and they will have started a meeting in there, and you will see a blue bar and it will say join, and I'd like you to click join. So essentially you're going to jump out of this meeting in the main hall and you're going to jump into your breakout room. So
are you in? Yeah, I was just going to come and it's simple.
So hopefully that's going to work.
Yeah, just turn my mic off.
And we will reconvene back in this main room at we're absolutely bang on time at 11:10. So in the time it takes you to move into your breakout rooms, feel free to have a comfort break, get some biscuits, get some toast, get a coffee, and then the LCP development team will be waiting for you in your breakout room to have a discussion. So
Graham?
Yes, hello.
Are we going to do questions before or after breakouts?
Ooh, yes, good point. Sorry, I was getting massively carried away there.
Have people already left though, Graham?
Damn it. Well, maybe we can
Maybe
do
after.
questions after.
Brilliant.
Yeah, well, we've got 58 people currently in the call, so actually only a couple have left. So we're I know they might have gone but not hung up. We'll do it when we come back. So we'll see you
Brilliant.
all at 11:10. Go and enjoy your breakout rooms. Don't hang up this call.
Thanks, Graham.